right, kids. Do you have any kids that want to come up and share with us this morning? Man, we got a herd of kids this morning. This is great. Corbin, you look a little down this morning. You don't look quite as cheery. Our Cowboys didn't do very good last night, did they? All right, well, cheer us up. Let's hear what. Share something with us.
Matthew 5:16, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.
Very good, thank you. Olivia?
Psalms 118:24. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it.
Very good, thank you. Olivia?
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Thank you. Who's wrangling cord this morning? Are you going to help him? Why don't you come help him? What's he doing? Is he going to sing again?
Jesus loves me, this now. The Bible tells me
Thank you, Cord. Braden?
The Bible, yes, that's the book for me. I stand alone on the Word of God. The Bible, Bible.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bo? You were supporting him, weren't you? Are you going to sing or? It's all right. All right, girls, are we doing something together? All right. We've got what is that, a quintet, I think? All right. Let's go. All right, let's see what you got.
Oh my God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. Oh my God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. And I will seek you in the morning, and I will learn to walk in your ways. And step by step you lead me, and I'll follow you all my days.
Thank you. All right, Evie, you're last.
John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but to have everlasting life.
All right. All right, if you would, let's bow with me and pray for our kids. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift that you've given us in our children, and we thank you for their willingness to get up and to share with us their song and verses they've learned. We ask that you protect them as they go to school or are off for Thanksgiving this week. Just protect them and guide them through their lives. And again, we thank you for them. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
If you would join us as we turn to number 358. 358. because he lives. God sent his son, they called him Jesus. He came to love, heal and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. How sweet to hold a newborn baby and feel the pride and joy he gives. But greater still, the calm assurance this child can face uncertain days because he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. And then one day I'll cross the river, I'll fight life's final war with pain. And then as death gives way to victory, I'll see the lights of glory, and I know he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. Quentin?
I'm very glad that Gary is here today to share with us. Gary was born and raised in Frederick, and he went to school with my dad. Therefore, I've known him all my life, or you know me all of mine, would probably be a better way to say it. So I will let him explain himself a little more detail, but it's so good to see you today, if you would.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Quentin, and thank you for inviting me up to talk. As I laid in the hospital in Fort Worth there at John Peter Smith in the intensive care unit, I was all alone. My family had came back to Frederick to deal with the things they had to deal with and stuff. And this is a couple weeks after my wreck. I realized that I need to share my story. And I just hope that the Lord would lead me to do that, and He has. And I had spoken, I gave my testimony in July to my home church, First Baptist in Frederick, and then I've spoken to First Baptist of El Dorado and First Baptist of Snyder, and I've spoken to the Tipton High School and junior high, and then it got quiet for a while. Then I thought, well, I hope I'm not done talking because I still got a lot to share. I don't feel the Lord's done with me yet, and then Quentin calls me. So if you people that's missed this one here, I'll be in Indiahoma at Les Banks' church next Sunday. But tell you about myself, I started my law enforcement career in 1984 at the Frederick Police Department. My father was the sheriff of Tillman County. He worked at the Frederick PD from 57 to 63, and in 1963 he went to work at the Tillman County Sheriff's Office and was eventually sheriff up until 1980. So that's where I got my hunger and desire for law enforcement. I have a brother who lives in Lawton who is an Oklahoma State Trooper and recently retired as of October 31st after 31 years. I worked from 85 to 89. I left Frederick PD as the assistant police chief and went to work for Kenny Stradley as the deputy sheriff from 89 to 92. So therefore, I'm very familiar with the location when Quentin told me it was. I always loved the old church that stood here. I always thought there's nothing that can beat a country church. It sits out there in the middle of nowhere. As you drive by on a weekday, you wonder what goes on Sunday. You know it's going to be full because something just about it, it's just like the pictures you see hanging with a church in the country, the trees around it. And then I drove by one day after I got over here, was working. I get bored with the highway and I get tired of dealing with people, so I want to see a little countryside. And I come down here and I go, they got 2 churches now. And then Quentin said, we tore the old one down, we're in the new one in the back now. I said, okay. But anyway, Billy Haynes ran for sheriff. Me and I were police officers together, and he asked me if I'd come back to be his undersheriff, and I said, sure. If you win, I'd be glad to. Not expecting he would because he was in his 20s whenever he was elected. I came back, and eventually my desire was to be an Oklahoma State Trooper. And after 5 years not having a patrol school, in 1994, I was accepted for the 48th Academy, which began in January of 95, and I went away for 17 weeks. First assignment was Anadarko. I was there 8 months. My mother's health got worse. I did what was called an intra-troop transfer, and that's because Cotton County and Caddo County are within Troop G in Lawton, so they let me and another guy just swap. So I went to Walters to get closer to home. March 1st of 97, I moved home. May 27th, my mother passed away. So I was home for 2 months to help take care of her, and I've been there ever since. So I know a lot of people. It's like I said, I know Roger and his family, I know Quentin and his family. I still give his dad a hard time. Him and Benny Barnett farmed together, and I said, that's the mayor of Hollister and the pool superintendent every time I see them together. So I love the community and the close-knit that I've always had there. And so through outlaw enforcement career, I've always believed heavy in the Lord. I was saved when I was 19 because I knew what I wanted to do, but I always had this, I guess you could say, premonition that I'd probably get shot in the line of duty. And I didn't. I lost 2 partners to gunfire, one of them Nick Green and one of them Steve Smith out of my academy. But I just kept my faith in the Lord, and I knew He'd protect me. But through that law enforcement career, I always felt that we get tested in life. And here's one of my most favorite stories of what happened one cold, blistery, snowy, sleet, freezing, rainy night. Quarter mile north of Frederick, there, just north of the old Alco store, there is an electrical substation. One of the police department guys got a call of somebody walking north out of Frederick, a couple. And I was just north of Manitou and was headed back towards Frederick for something warm to drink. The sheriff was out in his 4-wheel drive pickup, and he was out just patrolling. We were just checking our highways is what we do. And we really don't care about your speeders and stuff when it gets nasty. We want to find the ones that's off the road and get them assistance. And the sheriff and the police department converged on a young man. Oh, I say young man, he's in his 40s probably. He's about 5 foot tall. And a lady who was with him is about 5'9". I pulled up. We're trying to get him to go to a motel there in Frederick, and we'd get the Minstrel Alliance to pay for it, or we'd pay for it ourselves. But this young man that was with him, or with this young lady, when you got close to him, he was very agitated, very scared, but he would turn into the woman's bosom as she held him. and said, "Please back away. He's afraid of authority figures." He was come from a facility where he was physically abused, mentally abused. And I found it to be the oddest thing that a man would act that way. But what brought me even bigger question was, where did you come from? How did you get here? The questions that we asked them, they were very vague in answering. She done all the talking. He just grimaced and was scared anytime you got close to him. No matter how hard we begged and pleaded for them to come with us and go someplace where it was warm, they refused. Well, Billy, he has this way of wanting to be authoritative and said, "Well, if you don't come, I'm going to place you under arrest." And I just kind of looked at him and said, "For what?" He said, "Nothing, but I can't let them freeze to death." I said, "But if that's their choice, that's their choice." So we just let them carry on about the way, and they took off north. The snow was blowing so hard, it was blowing horizontal out of the west, northwest. So I always carry a bag of food and water in my trunk, because you never know whenever you're working, you're going to be sent on a manhunt or a tornado is going to strike. Like in Cordell, whenever I was working, I was sent up there, and your 8-hour shift may turn into a 24-hour day until other people from across the state can get there. So I always carry food and blankets. So I took off walking north. There was no traffic out. That's how miserable the weather was. So I took off back north. I met one pickup just about 2 south of Manitou. I went up to Manitou and I turned around and I came back. They were still walking north. They'd probably gotten about a half mile north of that substation. They had no lights. They had nothing. Nobody could see them if you was walking because it was blinding snow. So I turned around and I went back north, and I went up about a 3/4 of a mile ahead of them, and I got my bag of food out, and I broke one of those glow sticks, and I zip tied it to the handle, and I left the food in a blanket on the side of the road. So I came on to town, and I thought, I'm going to get me something to drink. Hopefully they'll find that and pick it up and carry it with them. So I came to town. I talked with Billy for just a little bit, and I talked with the police officer for a little bit. Then I started back north. There was no tracks coming south. The snow had already filled what I had left, or any other traffic behind me had left. And as I drive north, I passed that glow stick and that food sitting there. Well, the footsteps just go past it a little ways, and then they disappeared off the road. So I thought, well, there's a box bridge right there with a reflector on it. Maybe they got inside that. But there was no footprints leading off the road into the box bridge. Those footsteps just disappeared. How those people got there, nobody knows. The police department got a phone call. Well, I went back and backtracked. There was no footprints leaving Frederick, but there were footprints a little bit north of the old Alco store that began as if they were just put out there. But I'm thinking to myself, a good Christian or anybody in their have any compassion, Christian or not, would not put these people out freezing weather like this. So I hollered at the sheriff. I said, "Hey, meet me back at the substation." I grabbed my bag of food and took off, and I went back and told him. I said, "I think you and I were just tested by the Lord if what we're going to do, if we're going to extend our hand of opportunity and caring, because those prints just disappeared." He said, "Well, somebody had to pick them up." I said, "There's no prints coming south, Billy." I said, "And they didn't walk across the road to get in with anybody in North Mountain. They just disappeared." So I've always thought, I'm kind of tested. The Lord will test you. And he states that we'll take care of children, we'll take care of the elderly. So as my law enforcement careers, it went on, and I deal with the death and dismemberment of people in car crashes. And I've seen, as a police officer, the worst that we can do to each other as human beings. You have to have a faith in Christ and, his Father. So March 12th, I had gone down to the Davidson Public Schools. I went to work at 2 o'clock that afternoon. And I was down at Davidson, and I was visiting with one of the teachers and the school counselor about putting on a bicycle safety program. I was there for about 30 minutes. I left there, started north, and caught one speeding because, you know, as you go into Davidson, it breaks down 65 for 0.2 of a mile, 55 for 0.2 of a mile, then 45 for 0.2 of a mile, then you actually hit the intersection with Granfield. So when you down through there, it's easy to get violators and get your contacts. And I turned around on a red pickup, walked up, made contact, was walking back to the car. And as I looked up, I could see a semi and another vehicle coming. I just go ahead and get in the car. And I remember the semi going by. And that's all I remember. A gentleman who was looking at the wheat field to the left saw the semi change lanes, but didn't know what he was changing lanes for. And y'all seen these new lights that law enforcement has. You cannot help but not see those. I remember the explosion and thinking to myself, what just happened? And as I pulled my thoughts together, I realized I was lying in between the bucket seats. My head was in the back. My feet were still underneath the steering wheel. But the car being crushed in around me and the airbags deployed and the talc powder that's in the dust that I'd been struck. And I thought I need to get out and check on the other individual that hit me. But I couldn't move. I wiggled my feet. I could move my legs, my hands. I sat back up. And then I smelled gas, so I thought I need to get out of this car. So as I struggled and moved around inside the car, I could hear people coming around me and starting to talk to me. A young man by the name of Brent Varner was at Tony Jackson, his uncle's barn, just right north of Davidson, working on an implement, and he heard the explosion and thought a semi had a blowout. Until he steps around the corner and sees that I'd been struck, so he runs up there. And the guy that was with him is calling 911. I take my mic and I hand it to him. I say, "Here, you need to holler for help. They'll hear you on this one," and tell him you need a helicopter. I said, because of the pressure that's in my abdomen, I know I'm bleeding internally. And I'd moved around enough that I was trying to get out. I made it over to the passenger seat at this point when a young woman by the name of Susan. Has anybody seen the news footage where you hear that audio? It says, "Oh my God, it's Gary." It's just Susan. Susan was my classmate at junior high and high school and grade school. She lives in Snyder, works in Vernon in respiratory therapy, was on her way home from work when she came upon my accident. I don't really remember her being there because I remember just in and out of it at this point. But we had lunch several months later, and she said I grabbed her by the hair of her head and I pulled her down to where I was at and I had her bent over for almost 40 minutes. I just don't think that all the news footage says I was trapped for 40 minutes. I don't think it did because I could open the door. I know I could be taken right out. And it's only 9 miles from Frederick, and I was right at city limits of Davidson. So I know first responders don't take 40 minutes because from the time of my crash to the time I was in emergency surgery in Wichita Falls was less than 1 hour. But I do remember them taking me out of the vehicle and put me on the backboard, and I knew then that I had a broken hip because of excruciating pain. 8 days later, I woke up. I was conscious. I talked to my niece who was on the ambulance that came to me. I talked to the trooper that rode in the ambulance back to the hospital with me. I talked to the Metaflight crew that picked me up and flew me to Wichita Falls. But I don't recall any of it. I know I was in a coma for 3 days before I woke up and was pretty much in a drug-induced coma for another 5. Whenever I woke up and they had taken me off the drug to keep me sedated and I was coming around, I remember my younger brother being at my bedside. And I asked him, I said, "What happened? Where am I at?" He says, "You're in a hospital in Fort Worth. You were in an accident." And I said, "Was I on my motorcycle?" And he said, "No. You were in a patrol car and you were struck while you was on a traffic stop." I said, "Well, how bad am I?" And in his words, he said, "Your guts are all busted up." My daughter said, "You don't have to tell him like that." And he goes, "Well, he needs to know." You know how daughters are. You got to put it softly. So I kept asking what happened over and over because I had a concussion. The gentleman that was looking at the wheat crop said he never saw me. He drifted off the road at 68 miles an hour, driving a Chevy Silverado with a cattle guard on the front of it. Impacted me just about my left rear door, and the crush was at basically where I was sitting. It took the door and pushed it into the steering wheel. It turned my driver's seat sideways. We have a computer stand right here where our computer is. We do all of our business and work. I have a console between me. I got a printer between me. I've got a camera system mounted to the windshield. I've got all this stuff in front of me. When that Chevy pickup hit me, he moved my Dodge Charger from a 0 mile per hour to 48 miles an hour instantly. I crashed into the vehicle that I had stopped, the young lady and her 2 children. My body took off at between 45 and 50 miles an hour inside that car. I struck just within a few feet. I had my ticket book open. I was writing her a warning because our computer system runs on what's like a cell phone. It's called an air card. I had lost signal, so I was handwriting the contact. I got the date, the time, the location, and the first 3 letters of her last name written whenever he hit me. The ticket book in my lap between the steering wheel, the impact is what severed my small intestine completely in half from my large intestine. And the impact below that, it cut the large intestine and the lower colon completely in half, so therefore I was bleeding. I launched off and into the computer system and into the right windshield. My face went, breaking my nose and several teeth. The computer that when I struck it broke my hip. It's called an open but pelvic fracture. As your pelvic girdle comes around, you have 2 small holes at the bottom where the arteries feed into your legs. I broke that completely in half, and at the back, where it's hooked into your back and your sacrum and your spine goes into the hip, I broke it there, so my pelvis just fell open. There's a lot of arteries and veins in your pelvis, therefore I started bleeding from there. I was flown from Frederick to United Regional, which is now a level 2 trauma center, thank the Lord. They did exploratory surgery, stopped my bleeding, but I wasn't going to survive the flight from Frederick to Oklahoma City to the OU Medical Center, which is the #1 trauma center for this area. I was bleeding too fast. In the helicopter, I took 1 pint of blood and 1 bag of anticoagulant. At the hospital, I took 12 more bags of blood, but they didn't hang it on me and let it drip. They squeezed it into me. I was bleeding so fast. I was going to bleed to death. So the nurse, I spoke to her. She said, "I literally squeezed the blood into you as fast as I could squeeze it." They packed my cavity and clipped off a lot of the bleeding that they found, put me back into a helicopter and flew me to John Peter Smith, which is Texas's trauma hospital for North Texas. And there was an orthopedic and a surgical team waiting on me when I arrived, and I went right back into surgery before my family could get there. They found more bleeding, got the bleeding stopped. And then my daughter, who lived in Fort Worth, had to drive to Wichita Falls. And once I came out of surgery there, she had arrived by then. Laura found out by text message. I apologize, my prayers are with you. She had no idea what's going on. She sees the helicopter but has no idea that's for me. My family gathers up in Frederick. They meet in Wichita Falls. My daughter comes up from Fort Worth. We're there, and then now he's got to go to Wichita. So my daughter had to turn, back to Fort Worth. So my daughter had to turn and go back to Fort Worth. That surgery, by the time they got there, I was pretty much out of it. They got me stable, but I was still critical. And that was I had 2 surgeries on the 12th of the day I was struck. From that Thursday to that Sunday, I had 4 surgeries. Another one they had to bring me in and said, "He's still bleeding, we can't find it. His hip's unstable, it's causing a lot of problems." So my daughter at 26, and I'll tell you something here in a minute that we chuckle about now, but I'm glad it was in place. But she had to make the decision whether to have the surgery or not, knowing that one of the critical deals was I may not survive it. And thanks to the blessing of the Lord, I did. I survived everything. That's why I stand here before you today to share my story of the grace of God. But I came out of that surgery. They put an internal fixator in my hip. I've got a little plate on this side over here. I've got a screw that goes all the way through it and just pulled my pelvis back together. I lacerated my spleen. I went into kidney failure for 3 days. One of the machines quit while I was on dialysis. They removed the needle and went into my neck. I remember that. I was still awake when they did that one. They kept me on dialysis. And then when things got to looking good, my pancreas quit. And I remember I was so thirsty all the time. I drank a large bottle of Dasani water and 2 large styrofoam cups. They finally just said, you can't have no more ice chips, you can't have no more water. We're going to stick a feeding tube down in your stomach and we're going to hydrate you with an IV. I had 2 tubes in my stomach and I had IVs hooked up, and I remember pushing the button and the nurse said, can I help you? And I said, yes, could you get the chaplain to come see me, please? So the chaplain come in and he says, how can I help you, Mr. Sanders? And I said, would you pray with me and remove my quench for water? He said, sure. He said, why? I said, because I can't have it and I desire it. Just take away that desire, that lust for nourishment and water. And I said, I just want you to pray for me. I'm not strong enough. So he did. And I remember when visitors would come in, I would say, just give me a sip of water. Nope. I'd have fellow troopers that were in my academy come to visit me. Just give me a drink of water. Nope. Doctor said no water, no ice, no nothing. I was allowed to have those little spongy flavored lollipops to wash your mouth out and just nurse, keep it wet and stuff, but you had to rinse and spit. I'd always swallow just a little bit and spit a lot out, just to satisfy that thirst. And then for several days, I don't remember anything. I just remember waking up several days after I asked for that prayer, and the gentleman come in. He says, here, Mr. Sanders, you need to take your medicine. And I said, I can't take that. I can't swallow water. He says, no, your pancreas is functioning again. But I remember I would drink a lot of water right before it failed, and I would see black fluid come out of the tube, my nose, and go over into that tube. And I knew that's not right. I was thinking it was just blood. But they had me so sedated that I hallucinated a lot. There was a doctor there who sounded just like our former judge, David Barnett. And I would holler out his name, David, David. And I felt like I was in a grain mill where they ground flour, or grain for flour, and I was tied to a circular bed. I thought I was at a naval station because of the surroundings I had. I had a bed that would play music. That was real. I wasn't hallucinating about that. But I had all these things, and with the medicine I was on, stronger than morphine, called Dilaudid, it was an injectable Dilaudid painkiller. It made me hallucinate a lot. I do remember picking up the phone because in these new hospitals, you can push the button and get the nurse's station, or you have a phone, and on your board it tells you who your nurse is, who your RN is, who your doctor is. But they have little phones on their hips now. You just dial a 4 number and they call, yeah, what's up? I remember hitting 9 for an outside number and calling the 800 number for DPS in Oklahoma City one morning about 3 a.m. and telling the commissioner to come get me. I left him a message on his voicemail. So my mind worked and it didn't, and I had a lot of struggles. But as I got better and my mind came about me, I had to learn how to use my telephone again. I had to learn to do a lot of things. But on my phone, I had the Bible, so I had to read the Bible. And that's when I said I was going to share my story. For those 8 days, I didn't know what was going on, and for a few days after that, I really didn't. But I never was scared because I had my faith in my Savior. So I just thought, every day's a new day. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to get faster. It's kind of like the $6 Million Man commercial, or because it comes on. They put a trapeze above my bed for me to move around to keep from getting bed sores. I'd work out with it. That last surgery I had, they put what's called an external fixator. They come inside and they put long brass pins. They cut an incision in my hip. They screwed them into my hip. It sticks rods out and it's got a cross rod on it. They put that together, and it's got notches that say Titan. They got a live x-ray machine, and what they done was they put my pelvis as close to normal as they could get it. That's why I have a slight limp. My left leg is 1 inch shorter than my right. I'll have a limp the rest of my life. I don't have feeling in my thighs. I don't have feeling on this pin site where they screwed it in. You know, but my overall injuries was broken teeth, broken nose, ruptured spleen, ruptured colon, 6 broke ribs, 7 broke vertebrae, lacerated spleen and kidneys. To this day, I've never heard from the man that hit me. I'm sure his attorney said, don't say a word, but I've already settled with his insurance. It's not about the money. It's just about, you know, I forgave him. I'm not angry with him. Because as Psalms 118, 17, and 18 says, I shall not die, but live and declare the works of the Lord. He has chastened me, but he hasn't sent me to death. So I'm here for a reason. As I gave my interviews in Oklahoma City, I'm here because the Lord wanted me here. By the time I reached my 30th class reunion, I had lost 10 classmates. So when I hit 50, I started thinking a lot about death. Dying scared me. I wasn't afraid of dying. I just didn't want to go. My daughter hadn't gotten married. She hasn't had any grandkids yet. I got 2 with my son. You know, I still had a lot of life I wanted to live. And then after that wreck, I don't worry about death no more. I thought, because I was there. I was at death's door. I was one breath and one heartbeat away from crossing over. But yet I'm here. The flight crew out of Lawton that flew me to Wichita Falls, I had dinner with. When I was able to get around and walk, I was on a walker. And the one question I had for them was, did I ever die? And they said, nope. You talked the whole way, cracked a few jokes, complained about how bad you had to go to the bathroom. That's just from the internal pressure. And when I spoke to the lady that was in my surgery in Wichita Falls, she said, no, you were fine until we put you out, you know. But we knew you were in bad shape. So when I flew back to Oklahoma City, I went to a hospital that was called a long-term care facility. And I was told by a nurse that 90% of the people there will not ever go home. They're just there to die. And I was just there to be cared for. I wore that external fixator for 8 weeks exactly. Nurses would come in, RNs would come in, nurses' aides would come in, doctors would come in, and I would ask them. This thing stuck out of me like a TV antenna. And I would ask them, please, please do not bump it. It's so painful. They'd say, we won't. But they always did. It was the most excruciating pain. It got so bad in Fort Worth, I asked a lady, they were moving me from a cardiac care unit to a regular room. I asked her, I said, please, just come over here and take the leads off. She was short and reaching across. She got tangled up into it. It was so excruciating. That big, tall glass of ice water and stuff, I threw everything I had on my tray at her and everybody else. And I learned then, you have to be your own advocate for your own care. They're trained, but they really don't care. Some of them do, some of them don't. And when I got taken to that one room in Fort Worth, it was just a regular room, my level of care just went downhill. People would come in, they'd lay the tray on you, can I help you? One nurse set my medicine on the tray at the foot of the bed. I couldn't even bend in half to reach forward to get it. But there was this one elderly black woman named Patricia. She walked bent over. You could tell she had a bad back. She was the nurse's aide, and she come in and she said, after you eat your supper, I'm going to give you a bath. And I said, I was kind of, embarrassed about people taking care of me, having to do everything for me. And I said, that'd be all right. She said, no, I'll be back. She said, I'm going to take care of you. And the entire time she bathed me with that warm, soapy water and stuff in my head and my feet and extremes I couldn't reach. She always sang gospel songs. And as she left the room, she said to me, who sang to me that song, Just Call My Name and I'll Be There. She sang, Just Call Patricia and I'll Be Here. And she was the best caregiver that I ever had. And I had good caregivers, but she was the best. I had a lot of people that cared and concerned for me. So I get the pelvic fixator out after 8 weeks, and whenever I wake up, I'm in OU Medical, and the hip doctor says, you got to lay on your back one more week. I was on my back for 68 days. Non-weight bearing. I could raise my bed. I could move over to a wheelchair eventually. But I had to be very careful with that fixator sticking out. But once it was out, I was able to move my legs a little bit. As my legs got to move a little bit, I got a little bit more feeling in the lower extremities. I got a little stronger. And on May the 18th, my physical therapist came in. She said, are you ready to stand? And I said, yes. So she moved this machine up to my bed and had buttons on it. You put your elbows on it. When you push the buttons, it stood up, and you stood up with it. The doctor from Jim Thorpe Rehab says, you cannot come to my hospital until you can stand on your own 2 feet with no pain and walk. I walked from here to that door down to the nurse's station and said, call Jim Thorpe, I'm ready to go. That was at 9:30. 11:30, I was eating my lunch in Jim Thorpe Hospital. Doctor come in and said, you'll be here about 2 to 3 weeks. I said, I'm going home in 1. And he just kind of chuckled. He said, well, I'm leaving today for vacation. He said, I'll see you next week. That afternoon, I met my occupational therapist and my physical therapist. Physical therapy is hour and a half in the morning, hour and a half in the afternoon. You do an hour of one, occupational or physical, and then you alternate and do an hour of the other in the evening. So one gets you for 1 hour and off and on. They immediately put me on the parallel bars, and I couldn't walk. I barely could hold myself up. I had to walk forward, I had to walk backward, I had to walk over steps. My feet drug. I had to learn to walk basically all over again. By the next day, I was walking pretty good with a walker. We walked outside the hospital. We walked back inside the hospital. And on Thursday, I had to walk a German Shepherd therapy dog with no cane and no walker, just me, at my pace. Thursday afternoon, the nurse came in. The doctor came in. That was in replacing the doctor that was on vacation. Dr. Self was her name. She said, we had a meeting about you today. Are you ready to go home? I said, yes, I am. She said, okay, you can leave here Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. So I called Laura and told her I was coming home. I get to go home Saturday. Need to be here to pick me up. And that afternoon for physical therapy, I had to play ping pong. I had to stand at a ping pong table and play ping pong for 15 minutes standing on my feet. And if I could do that, I could go home. When you get so focused on hitting that ball, you forget about what you're supposed to be doing, standing, and the pain that you're in. But May 23rd, I came home to my town lining the streets, cheering me on. When I pulled into my driveway, there was nobody there, but I had to get my walker out of the trunk, come around. But within that time, there was 100 people in my driveway. There's nothing like support from your community, your church, people you don't know. Public information officer for Oklahoma City's main office told me he was getting calls as far away as Australia, London, wondering about me. I have a huge, huge box full of cards. I probably have close to 700 cards. My community gave me nearly $12,000. And I still have nearly all of it. And I've given it back to the food bank, to the church, different organizations. My community fed me. I'll feed my community. But like I said, not once was I ever scared that I was going to die. I still got a little bit to go. I mean, just a little over 8 months later, I'm standing here before you. I walked up here. unassisted 4 months ago. I was on a cane. I guess it helps when you have a physical therapist tech. Your daughter's a physical therapist tech, and she's on the couch over Tuesday. Did you do your exercises today? And you got a lot of support. Laura's always been by me. She missed a lot of work. She never left my side. She aggravated me a lot whenever I was in Fort Worth because she'd drive down there after work for 3 hours and leave at 4 in the morning to drive back to Frederick, go to work at the court clerk's office. And I appreciated it, but I always worried about her, so I never got no rest until 3 hours later she said, I'm home. Then I could go to sleep. But my community stood by me, and my family stood by me. And like I said, I knew I wasn't going to die, and I quit worrying about death at that age. I guess at some point in time, we all begin to wonder, halfway through when you're young, you feel young, and your classmates are dropping, left and right. You wonder, are you next? But back 2 years ago, I started getting my affairs in order. I thought, well, I need to get my power of attorney. I need to get my my do not resuscitate. I need to get all those guidelines and stuff. And I told my daughter, Jessica, I said, you need to come. I don't want to talk about it. I said, we need to deal with it. I don't want to talk about it. So I just dropped it until one day she come home. And I said, here's where it is if you ever need it. In February of last year, I called the retirement board, and I said, hey, how am I going to be if I retire at 20 years? I didn't like what she had to say, so I thought, well, I'll work another 5. Less than a month later, my daughter was making my decisions for me, and I'm on the verge of retirement. She said, see, if you plan for it, it's going to happen. Well, back in July, my brother came to me and said, hey, here's a list of burial plots out at the Frederick Cemetery, and we're right around where Mother and them are. And I said, I don't even want to talk about it. If you plan for it, it'll happen. And so every day, I get up, it's tough. I hurt. Some days I can't even move. Boy, like today when the weather's cold, that pin in my hip sure reminds me it's there. But I don't rely on pain meds. I don't want to do that. I just pray for healing, and I get it. I don't get dressed near as fast as I used to. I enjoy riding my motorcycle. I enjoy taking trips, and the Lord's blessed me with that. I've been able to do that. Suffering from losing so much of your intestines. You have problems with dehydration. I lost a little over 5 feet of my small intestine and some of my colon. The doctor in Oklahoma City gave me some little powder you put in juice, and he changed my life forever. He put me back to normal. I sure am glad that the Lord gave them their wishes and said, you want to be a doctor? I'll make you a doctor. You're going to help people. Because they've helped me, I came home to T-shirts that said, hometown hero, hometown prayers. Ladies and gentlemen, and by no means in my mind am I a hero. Heroes are those who risk their life for others and sacrifice in war and things like that. I just did what I had to do. I was put in a situation where I had to live. I never thought I was going to quit. Quit's not my vocabulary. I say that a lot. I tell people that. You quit, you're done. My life was changed in an instant by a gentleman looking at a wheat crop. I believe he went to sleep because he got tired and took a nap at Snyder. But nonetheless, the situation is not changed. It happened. It happened to me. It can happen to anybody. If you've got the will to survive, and you've got the will to survive, I'm sure in this room there are cancer survivors, heart attack survivors. You fought your own battles, and to your family, you're heroes. Well, to my daughter, I'm her hero. But to me, I'm not. They tell you in OHP Academy, you better have the will to survive in you, because you may fight for your life in a bar ditch over your own gun one day. Well, I fought for mine in the front seat of a 2012 Dodge Charger that doesn't hold up very well to a Chevy Silverado. And I knew then the fight was on. But like I said, from the time I lost consciousness to the time I woke up, I don't remember what happened. The Lord took care of me. When I woke up, I rarely was in ever any pain unless a doctor or nurse hit that fixator. But I did what I had to do. I had my family there to support me. I had strangers supporting me. And I'm sure all of you experienced how small a world it is. People that took care of me in Fort Worth had relatives in Frederick. People in Oklahoma City were from Burke Burnett and Granville. My head charge nurse was the DPS commissioner's sister. It's amazing how our lives are intertwined with people that we never know, never touch, but they know all about you. So my message to y'all is one, thank you for letting me come and share my testimony, but it's just that the Lord does take care of us. You know, I'm living proof of that, and there's other members in here that have other stories or know people like that. I'm not just the only one. I just asked the Lord to let me share my testimony, and Quentin gave me the opportunity to do so. But life can change in an instant. It can be taken quickly. Never did I ever think I would be hit on the side of the road. That never crossed my mind. Never. If I'm standing on the side of the highway working and wrecking, directing traffic, I've thrown my hat at cars. I've thrown my flashlight at cars to get them to slow down. That's what happened to Nick Dees and Keith Birch up there at East Oklahoma City in January. A man updating his social page drove around all the lighted patrol cars and pinned Nick Dees between the drive axle of that overturned semi in the front of his car, killing him instantly. Now, to get on the political side of this, I just want to inform you something. After 8 months, the district attorney in Tillman County finally has my case to decide what charge will be filed against the man that hit me. I want to share something with you that's going to just blow your socks off. Probably the only thing that's going to happen to him is he's going to get cited for a traffic offense. As I said, I'm one breath and one heartbeat away from manslaughter or reckless driving. $444.50 if he pleads guilty, but DA can recommend 590 days in the county jail. If that happened to you or another loved one, it's a traffic offense. I'm going to contact my representatives and people I know and say, you know, you need to make it a criminal charge, because a reckless act, you can be deer hunting and miss the deer and hit another hunter you didn't see, and you can be charged. You didn't mean to, but you can be charged. It's a crime. Why can't it be a crime if you're driving unattended with a 5,000-pound bullet and you maim somebody, cripple somebody, do what he did to me, and all you get's a ticket? The new texting law went into effect. If he had been texting and hit me, he'd got a $100 fine for crippling me and almost killing me. Things have got to change. Times change, technology changes, so you're going to have to keep up even with the criminal law on it. It's got to be changed. But the things about it is this: I'm here today. I praise God every night. Lord, and I say a prayer every evening when we go to sleep. Thank Him for the day. Thank Him for everything He's given us, and ask for blessing for tomorrow. But like I said, everybody here has their own story. And I could sit out there and listen to you as you sit here and listen to me. You never know when He's going to strike. One friend of mine who's a pastor in Lawton said, you know, Gary, sometimes in that spiritual world, you can look at it as if Satan drove him into you to try to claim your soul, and the Lord saved you and said, no, you're not taking him, he's mine. But in the human kind of world and what we see every day, it's a traffic crash. He said things are manipulated strangely, and we have no idea what's going on in that world. So you need to be ready. And he's the one that gave me the psalm that I quoted. Like I said, thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. Thank you for all your prayers, because they sure do work, let me tell you. They do work. If I can ever be of assistance to y'all in any way, let me know. I will return to work sometime between now and March 12th. That's my goal. Unfortunately, I will not be able to go back to the road where I really love to be. I like working with the guys I work with. But the assistant chief called me and said, Gary, don't worry about it. Get better. We have a place for you. When I got hurt, before the Oklahoma State Trooper Association could give any money, that's separate of the OHP completely. We're members of that. We have a division called the Trooper Assistance Program. 2 troopers are assigned to it. OSTA funds it. They paid for my family's room and board, gas money if they needed it, but the Fort Worth Police Department police chief put my family up for 2 days. Their department did that. Law enforcement's a big brotherhood. Doesn't matter where you're from. But that unit, Trooper Assistance Program, I've had the lieutenant ask me, he said, Gary, I could really use you here. You got the compassion for it. You understand it. You've been through it. I'm still a state trooper. I'm just assigned to another unit. That's where I want to go. And if I ever get stronger and faster, things where I can run again and move quickly, I'd like to go back to the road, but I just don't see it happening. The reason I don't want to go back to the road is in the old days when I was in shape, I could handle a belligerent drunk, but I don't want to have to go to a sidearm and take a man's life when I don't need to. So I'm smart enough to realize that's not where I need to be, so there was something like that won't happen. But I still want to be a part of the patrol and be active in my community. Like I said, I know across the street, that's Tillman County across the street, right? I know there's a 4-mile section here somewhere. Because they always skid coming down this road and hit over there, and I'd have to get out and come work that wreck. But I just want to be a part of my community and my county. Like Quentin said, I was born and raised here. I know these roads here. When my dad ran for sheriff, I knocked on many stalls, many fishers, Niagara bars, doors, putting Lake Steve Sanders sign when I was just a little boy. My reward was when I walked to every town in this county and did what I had to do, I got a motorcycle. So I know a lot of you in this area. I know the back roads this way, and I kind of know who's who out here. But once again, thank you for allowing me to come. Quentin, thank you for the invite. Sorry I couldn't come whenever you were. It was the day you ate. But I had shoulder surgery the 5th. But you can feed me anytime you're over that way. Or your dad can. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. And I appreciate you. May God bless each of you. And have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.